This episode of Bookworm is brought to you by Headspace. Go to headspace.com/bookworm to unlock all of Headspace free for 30 days with the coupon code Bookworm.
So I got a fancy new thing to show you, Mike.
Ooh, let's see.
And it's going to be a little unfortunate for the actual podcast, but I got this really cool thing that my wife made me, which is a leather cover for my lake term.
Nice.
And she actually made this, which is quite the thing. The part that I like about this, you'll probably hear some of that on the thing, is that it's got like a pin loop underneath of the clasp on the thing. I'm very much a fan of this thing because she knows how obsessed I am about this, and I am attempting to see if I can get her to make some more of them so that she could sell them. That's why I'm bringing it up, because she wants to know if people are interested in it. Yeah, Blake mentions like my wife has been posting it on Instagram as she's been working on it. So anyway, it's kind of a cool thing, but I'm pretty stoked about it. She's gotten very good at the leather craft, I will say. So very, very excited to see her doing that. It's kind of fun to watch. But anyway.
Yeah, I saw a couple pictures come across too. This looks great.
Yeah.
I didn't see the finished product previous to the big reveal here, but
yeah,
that looks really nice.
Yeah, it's fun. It's kind of cool. So I'm going to see if I can get her to make another one, put it up for sale, see what happens. So I'll let Carol and Blake know first, apparently. So there you go.
You could do, there's a guy who wrote a book, The Anti-Net, I think. It's basically like an analog Zettelkasten book. And it's like 700 pages or something, and you can only buy it directly from the guy who wrote it.
Okay, yeah.
It was recommended to us by somebody in the club.
Okay.
And I bought the book, so I'm on this guy's mailing list now, and he had a analog Zettelkasten that he was selling to his email list, and it was the one and only. Like, this is the only one that he was going to make. And he sold it for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. I forget what it actually went for because I had absolutely no interest in it. But it was interesting, the framing. It was like, this is the one. So if you want it, like, click here to sign up. And then I'll let you know when it goes for sale, and you got like an hour to get it. Otherwise, it's moving to the next person. You could do the same thing with this.
I suppose we could. I know there's going to be like a minimum cost on it just because of like it's real leather, so the thing costs quite a bit. So just a forewarning, but it's pretty cool.
Right.
It's pretty cool. Let's see. I'm looking at our notes, Mike, and we have a very long list of follow-up action items this time around.
Yeah, I don't see anything on here, but I could have sworn you had one. So now I'm confused. Let me go back no, we didn't capture anything last time. We must have, I remember reviewing that episode and publishing it last week while I was on vacation, which is part of the reason that I messed up the pro feed. Paul, sorry about that. Yeah, I remember we talked about how the action item was really just rethink your creative process. But in the back of my mind, I had this thing that you had one small action item, but no. Well, that was quick.
It did good. All right. Awesome. Follow up complete. Check. That brings us to today's book.
That's okay. We're gonna need the extra time for this one, probably.
Possible, yeah. So this will be an interesting conversation and probably very animated at times. The Future is Analog. This is by David Sachs. He is also the author of The Revenge of Analog, which I read a few years ago. And this is, you think about it as kind of a debrief of the human experience of what it was like to go through lockdown during the pandemic and why some things worked and why some things didn't. Probably a little more heavily weighted on why things didn't go the way we thought they should. I found out by reading this that David Sachs is a little more opinionated about things than I recall from his other book that I've read. He's written, I think, 4 now. And this one definitely struck me as he has lots of opinions. The others, not so much. So is what it is. But what was your initial take on the book, Mike?
Well, I have to say that I was really excited to read this one because The Revenge of Analog had been on my radar for a while. However, this was basically an I told you so for everything that happened in COVID. And that was unfortunate. I kind of wish you had picked the other one.
I will say, like, the other one compared to this one, I really enjoyed the other one in a way that, like, explained why in certain specific analog areas, like, why is writing with your hand a very different experience than writing with a keyboard? Why is a vinyl record a better sound than listening to a digital streaming service, even though the quality is technically worse? Like, why is that? Why do we want that? That was the revenge of analog. This is not that. If we just jump right into this, like in the introduction, he's basically pitching the beginnings of the COVID pandemic and how we were sent home and then everybody had to quarantine, how he went up to, I think it's his mother-in-law's lake home or his mother's lake home? I forget which one it was. They went north to this like retreat home of sorts. And that's where they did their first stint of the pandemic in quarantine. And then basically what was the experience of going through these different areas? And he has the book laid out by going through an entire week, which is basically Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday through Sunday, and picks a different topic to discuss for each of those, which is kind of somewhat based on what you would typically do on that day of the week. So it's an interesting endeavor to work through all of this. One of the things that I wrote down from the introduction is he has some quotes and a little excerpt from what would be considered, I guess, a long essay called "The Machine Stops" by E.M. Forster. Have you read this? Do you know what this is?
I have not.
So I have this, and I read this. It's probably been at least 4 years ago now, and it's a very quick read. I read it in one sitting. The premise of that particular essay, I'll call it, is that it is in the future when people basically create an entire machine that treats the air that they live in, it brings video feeds to them, it brings their food to them, it washes them, it does everything for them. And they live underground because the air above ground is unhealthy. And everything revolves around this machine. The machine even fixes itself. Like if it has problems, it has these robots that come through and fix it. And over time, people are starting to like try to escape it. And there are a few like groups of people who are like going up for air to try to acclimate their bodies to the real air so that they're not going to die if they escape to that. But basically at the end of the essay, the machine breaks down and stops working. And then the question is what happens? But he ends that essay with saying like the machine has stopped. Then what? And the then what isn't explained. Like that's the end of the essay. That as the backdrop of going into this, like that's the concept and the forward-thinking ideology that he is pitching or has been pitched to us. And that's the kind of the groundwork that he's laying out in this introduction. It's like this concept of we're going to build this digital future, this machine, if you will, that can do everything for us and make everything better. Like that utopia, is it something that we should strive for? Time we're done with this, we'll have a very clean answer to what his opinion is on that.
Right. Reminded that the description you were just sharing reminded me kind of Wall-E. I don't know if that's exactly what you're going for with that, but yeah, I think this is a bitter old man yells at clouds sort of situation here.
Yes.
So what, for context, I was excited about this book because I feel like we read The Shallows by Nicholas Carr, and I made the same comment when we read through that one, that this just sounds like a lot of complaining.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's problems with this stuff, but I don't think it's is I don't know, it just feels negative. Like I don't appreciate that. And so David Sachs, Revenge of Analog, I was really excited about that. And then yeah, this ends up being like, these are all the problems with COVID. Like we all went through it. We understand the
Right.
problems with
Right.
COVID. No one is arguing at this point. Yeah, let's continue to just do things digitally. So it's kind of framed as like I don't know if this is intentional or not, but like, yeah, I told you so, right? See how smart I
Yeah.
was.
Yep.
And I don't know. It's unfortunate. I like the approach with the different chapters for the different sections. Not sure it actually works. Maybe by the end of the conversation, I'll have made a decision before we get into style and rating, because each one of these, it feels like he's grabbing snippets of other books that we have read, which speak to these things. Like he talks about Cal Newport, Slow Productivity, and the Work One. He talks about, let's see, there were a couple other specific ones. He mentioned Sherry Turkle before, so that like reclaiming conversation. He talked about, I'm blanking on the other ones. There were like 3 or 4 different ones. Basically, every time we went through a chapter, I was like, oh, he's referencing this other book that we read, which is like a deep dive on this, which is sort of what we just talked about in, I forget, there's a recent book where like, oh, we didn't really get deep enough yet. Slow Productivity hasn't been written. Yeah, I realize that, but that's like a concept that Cal's been talking about for years with like the deep work and stuff like that. So I don't know. I guess, it makes sense to tackle analog and all these different domains, but yeah, maybe we should just jump into these one by one, and maybe you can change my mind about some of this stuff.
Fair enough. Yeah, so let's jump into the first one, and I'll do my best to kind of explain some of the background for each of these. But the first one is Monday. The thing that people do on Monday is they go back to work for the week, right? So he talks about work and working from home. And this, I think, could be interesting, knowing that you work from home. I certainly do not. And I have worked from home extensively in the past. But what he gets at is that whenever people went into lockdown and went home to work, like people bought the cameras, they bought the microphones, they did all the things, but sitting on Zoom meetings all day long, technically you got productivity done. Like that was with a lot of stats. If you remember, like all the news articles, like productivity has skyrocketed. The question mark that he poses is, how are you defining that term? Yep. Because there are a lot of places that would say that their productivity has dropped, if not completely stopped, and that the technicality of getting things accomplished typically would include responding to Slack messages, doing email, and sitting on Zoom. Like that would qualify as getting work done. But the creative side of it, which we've talked about a lot lately, is like the creative process. Areas where they had that as a focal point would just completely fail and had all sorts of issues. And he talks a little bit about why that is. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on, Mike, like some of this, this is a big problem, working from home is terrible concept. Knowing that you work from home, how did you take this, dare I ask?
An introvert working from home.
Yep.
Let's frame
that.
Fair
enough.
So I recognize that there are issues with just being remote, and there are a lot of organizations that they were forced to go home. They had an office previously, and they have to rethink how they do things. So that's a different conversation than like a lot of the work experience that I have had, which has been primarily remote before the pandemic. So I appreciate the fact that like some people had to just completely figure this out from scratch, and that is where things went awry, I feel. I don't think it's necessarily impossible to have a productive remote work experience. I've been doing that for the last several years. Even the job I took with the day job now, that is completely remote. The thing when you're doing remote, though, is that you do still need to have, and I do emphasize need, if you are going to really function together as a team, you need human interaction. And so I've seen the way this has worked previously is every couple of months, every quarter with Asian Efficiency, every cycle with Blanc Media, I would fly to the location and we would just hang out and do our quarterly planning. Like there's some work stuff that happens there, but the majority of it is just you building relationships with people. And you can't really quantify how that helps all the other work that you do together, but it is necessary, I feel. I don't think you have to do it on a set schedule, but people, they do need that connection. When you don't have that, and then you couple that with people who don't know how to work remote, you have a terrible situation. I remember working with Sean and doing a focus course call with some people, and they were complaining about their working remote and their bosses basically the way that they handled the situation was everybody worked remote, and the C-level executives all had their 8 hours of meetings every day, and they required everybody to be there so that they were heard. And then they logged off and, okay, great, we got a lot done today. And everyone else was freaking out because they were also expected to continue to do crank all the widgets that were required for their job, right? And now they had to learn how to do that off hours. And so definitely like complete lack of empathy there in certain situations. And I think the situation could facilitate that if you're not careful. But that's really a working with jerks problem. I mean, those were issues that existed before the pandemic, and they just were hidden behind some analog process. I think anyone who's smart and cares is able to overcome those obstacles, but that doesn't mean that that's a lot of people's experience. You're going to fall into that stuff if people don't care, and a lot of people don't care. So
yeah, I know that like when we went into the lockdown period, like I was one of those people that didn't really affect at all because I was at the church trying to like build all the equipment and the gear for the live streaming and stuff, which was the lifeblood of the church at the time. And there was one particular day I remember very vividly because my boss decided we were going to do our normal staff meeting like we did typically. And so we jumped on Zoom, and I was at the building. Everybody else was at home. I still had a lot of stuff I needed to get done. So I put in my wireless earbuds and then was sometimes in front of the camera, sometimes not. But I left my mic on because there were ways I could mute and unmute it while I was moving around. So if they asked me a question, I could respond even though they couldn't see me, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the meeting lasted like an hour and a half. And you're instantly smiling because everybody knows an hour and a half on Zoom is torture. And there were lots of, okay, let's go around the room. And like all of the pauses and the waiting and the talking was just, it was hard. And I think everybody felt that. And he gets into some of this here in this chapter just because there's a lot of stuff that happens in between like those Zoom calls. Like if you had like one a day, it's probably fine. When it's all day, then there's so much that you're not seeing and that you're not experiencing together. Like we're doing this recording over Zoom, right? So like I can see Mike, I can see his head, I can see his headphones, I can see some of what's behind him in a bookcase, but I know what's to his left in that room because I've been in that room before, but it's probably either clean or dirty or things have been moved around. Who knows? Like things could be different than what I remember them as, but he can see it right now, right? So like you can see that, Mike, but I can't see it. So you couldn't reference something on, say, the table because I can't see it. It would be a whole process of you getting it to show it to me, right? So we don't have a truly shared experience because we're not in the same room. Like you have no idea that I have security cameras sitting on the floor in front of me, but if you were in this room together, you would know that instantly. Like that sort of thing changes the entire environment. So like, yes, we're on a video call together, but you're only catching a very small subset of the communication and the experience together. That's the part that's missing. Now expand that to if you're in a creative work environment, silly dumb stuff like your commute, as much as we bemoan those, is actually very valuable, because you, like he calls out, you tend to see a lot of small things and they help inform some maybe decision making things that you're working through, or it gives you an idea for a specific article or an architecture idea. Like it gives you a lot of ideas. So being able to go through some of those seemingly mundane processes that you feel like are a waste of time actually are helpful. We just don't necessarily realize that. To me, that was a very important part of this particular chapter. That, and what was the other one? The craft piece, which he had towards the end of this. He started talking about like craft beer, but ultimately, like if you give people, the concept was that if you give people the freedom and trust them to do their job, help them to hone their craft, they'll do a good job. But if you're constantly wanting to like do check-ins and do meetings and constantly keep an eye on them and manage them and not give them that freedom, then craft tends to fail or fall apart. So anyway, work from home doesn't always work, Mike.
I feel like this one, the book that we've covered that speaks to this topic is Digital Body Language.
Yeah, that's true.
Because you're right, we don't have the shared context. I don't think that's completely necessary. What you really need is alignment on the rules of engagement. And that's where, like, when you're coming from, we used to meet in an office and now we're doing this virtually. And what do we do? Like, that's where you have the big gaps in the Zoom call that lasts an hour and a half. But it doesn't have to last an hour and a half. I mean, we do daily stand-ups with the day job, and there's a very specific format that we follow. Even though we have 12 team members, we're done in 15 minutes, where people share, this is what I'm working on, this is where I'm stuck. We discuss real briefly how we get that person unstuck, but everybody kind of knows, like, if I'm stuck with something that I'm waiting on Joe for, I'm going to bring that up in the huddle, and no one else is going to speak at that moment. Joe is going to respond, and he's going to say, this is where it's at, or I will get to that right after the call. By end of day, this will be done, that kind of stuff. So it's sort of like dancing, I guess. Like there's give and take there. You have to recognize when it's your turn to do something and when it's not. And what he's describing painfully in all of these chapters is the video awkwardness of all these different situations. And he's right in a lot of them. That's just like, you can't do a book club virtually. Maybe you can, because we do that. But like the one that he's describing, where everybody is close friends and part of it is that they're enjoying some alcoholic beverages together. And so like that changes the interactions. Like, of course, that's something totally different than a video we stream on YouTube. If that's what you're after with that, then yeah, you have to take some intention and consideration in crafting the environment where you want that sort of stuff to happen. Now, that doesn't appeal to me at all, to be honest. So I don't know. He's bemoaning the fact that he's lost this kind of stuff. I'm like, yeah, it's cool. That's where I was with the work thing. I'm like, yeah, actually, there's a lot of benefits to working remote, and I really enjoy those. And I feel like I've been able to navigate that stuff. That's part of it is also like, this is the new book, right? And there's a lot of benefit to reading those timely books a lot of times. However, this one, just the exact moment that we're in and the process that he went through to write this, and the fact that this is yet another book talking about how COVID ruined our lives, like, I'm ready to be done with that.
Yes.
And specifically as it pertains to work, like, can we just figure this out and move forward? It was what it was. It is what it is. Let's just move on, please.
And to be fair, I didn't realize that was the whole point of this, because everything that I had read or seen about this didn't touch that at all. Yep. So I was like, We're really going to have an entire book debriefing the pandemic. I was not ready for that, but that's what we got.
Let's go relive that
Yep,
again.
here we go. We're gonna go back in time and live all the horrible again. That said, let's go to school. Um, so the next day or chapter is Tuesday, where he talks about school, and it's, I would say, pretty similar to the work conversation in that he's showing what the experience was like for kids, because this is an area like in every chapter it's always talking about how there's like this promise of a digital future that would then be better than where we're at right now. So like that's always the pitch, and that's been a big pitch in the world of education for a long time. It's like, iPads for every student, all of this digital, learning from home concept is something that's been pushed and advocated for many years. And COVID kind of forced us to go full steam ahead on that, sent everybody home. Parents had to get involved with their kids' education on a daily basis when they were not necessarily used to doing that. And it's one where he's explaining that kids were then able to do school. How did he put this? Kids were able to do school where, how, and whenever they wanted. But my question whenever he made that comment was then, who's going to teach the kids the self-discipline to do that? Because you and I as adults struggle with that self-discipline when we're working from home. He just finished a whole chapter on how that's hard to do,
Yep.
do the work from home thing all day, every day. And then he turns around and goes into the, like, kids can do this. They don't have the experience or the learning to know how to manage themselves in a way to make that work. So then he tells the fun stories of his son in kindergarten doing Zoom for many hours a day. I have no interest in helping a kindergartner do school online for an entire day, let alone months on end. Like, that just does not.
Yep.
That sounds terrifying to me. So school at home, no good.
Unless you homeschool.
It's true. It's true. The virtual school, I should say. Maybe I should clarify that.
Yeah, there you go.
Since we homeschool.
Yeah, there's a ton to unpack in this tiny little chapter, and he's not able to speak to all of this stuff effectively just in the format that he chose. So I recognize that. I don't want to attack a whole bunch of things here, but this one specifically, I feel like I don't know. I've got a real good picture in my head of what this was actually like. One of my the guys in my discipleship group is a teacher for fifth grade locally, and he kind of switched careers 5 or 6 years ago because he believed that he should have been a teacher. He's like, he was working with the family landscaping business, sitting in the school parking lot because they were snow plowing in the winter, watching the teachers go in. He's like, that should be me. Went back to school, got his degree, is a teacher now, and he's won last couple of years like the teacher of the county award.
Sure.
Like, he's really, really good at it. So when this happened, like, he was distraught because the school that he teaches at, I mean, you've been in our area. We're not like inner city or anything, but the school that he teaches at tends to be the school where there's a lot of at-risk kids. So he knows that like these fifth graders that he has, they're coming from broken homes. A lot of them don't have dads at home, stuff like that. And he's like, that's not a good situation. They can't be home alone all day, every day. Like, they're not going to do well in that scenario, that environment. So he was doing everything that he could. Like, he would drive to people's homes and talk to them through the screen door, as soon as he was able to do that. And like, he was going above and beyond, working 18-hour days just to try to physically, wherever and however he could, connect with his kids beyond the screen. Right? Because he knew that the screen was not gonna translate. Now, that being said, I guess I say that to say, like, there are some problems that go a lot deeper here than David Sachs talked about. There are also, he kind of touched on this a little bit, but kind of glanced over it, that there are a lot of kids who don't have access to technology. and they're in the worst of the worst environments, and those are the ones who suffered the most. One of the churches that I follow, I've not actually been there, but there's a church in California called the Dream Center, Matthew Barnett, and they created this whole big open air building during the pandemic and got a whole bunch of technology. And so it's got like one of those coverings, so it's in the shade, but it's outside, so it follows protocols and stuff, and kids can just show up and do their school there, right? Because they don't have that sort of stuff at home. I really appreciate people who are able to see the real needs of people like that. The stuff with his son, like, that's funny,
Right.
but it's really not that big a deal. Correct. Compared to what other people have went through. I also have experience with the family business, and that's educational software for primarily special education. So he talks in this chapter about how a big part of learning is like this social emotional learning, and that he is 100% right on that. The social emotional aspect actually is more important than the hard skill stuff that you will learn in the classroom. And that's what it was diluted down to when all you had was the virtual stuff. However, the social emotional learning stuff, this has always been an issue for a certain percent of the population, even when they were meeting together in person, primarily the populations that the family business served. If you've got a lower functioning individual, they typically don't have these social emotional skills, but these are the skills that they need to function independently. How are you going to learn those? You got to learn those, right? So, I mean, we've got whole lines of products for the family business that are built on this concept of video modeling, right? So there are certain populations that the only way they learn these skills is through a screen, because you can't put them in that situation. They'll freak out, right? But if you've got a lower functioning individual who is severely autistic, let's say, right? And they go into a grocery store to do their shopping, the amount of noise and everything that's going on there, like, that can cause a panic attack. But if you can practice that ahead of time, you can go do what you need to do, and you can be around other people, and you can interact, and you can leave and go back home. And that's a win, right? So that's like, we've got whole products that are kind of built on that model. Like, you can watch these videos, you can understand the proper way to behave in a certain situation, and then when you see it, you recognize it, and it's generalizable, transfers different domains. Like, that's a really powerful concept. So again, like, there's a whole bunch here. I don't think he really spoke to it effectively. The one tidbit I got from this is the thing about Finland's education system. I like this.
Yeah.
There were a couple.
This is good.
Couple things he called out here about how and why it's always in the top in the world rankings. Not maybe the top, but near the top. Their academic instruction starts later. There's almost no homework. There's no standardized testing, and teachers have autonomy. They have the trust of the organization that whatever they're going to do is going to be right for the kids. That's awesome. I love that kind of stuff. And that's the thing that reminds me a lot of homeschooling, honestly. I mean, not that you have no process, but that's the thing people are always worried about. It's like, well, you're not a certified teacher. How are you going to make sure your kids have all these skills? I'm like, don't worry about it. They're going to be better off. And that's hard for some people to understand.
Yeah, that's tough for people to grasp. It was uncanny to me how many people helped their kids with the virtual school, and then the next semester or the next school year started homeschooling. Like, just done. Like, if I'm going to be teaching my kids anyway, I might as well do all of it. Like, that was the mentality. So it completely changed things for them. I know one of the quotes that he had in here, I think it was his daughter, said that the digital virtual school is all of the work and none of the fun, because they just didn't have the interactions with their fellow classmates. And I know that, like, for a number of students, that's a good thing. Like, they're in that category where, like, that was not a pleasant experience. So going home helps. So there are those, but broadly speaking, it became a bigger issue, which kind of leads us into the next piece here, which is on Wednesday, where we get to talk about commerce. This one actually opened my eyes a little bit to some things that were going on that I don't think I really knew about. Like I knew some of it, but not all of it. Uh, the biggest part that he's talking about here, and he kind of talks about this in the school, and you kind of alluded to it as well, is like the divides that already existed got exacerbated, like they got even worse. So, like we were talking about the divide between the haves and the have-nots in school got even wider. Just because if you had good computers and you had a good internet connection, it would be like you could afford those things. Well, then that meant that you were in a better place to do well with school. But if you didn't have the ability to afford that, now it's an even bigger problem when you can't even connect to the teacher at all. And a similar thing happened in the world of commerce with small businesses and big corporations. The scale thing meant that Amazon and Walmart did wonderfully well, but your small mom and pop shops close their doors because they can't make it. And you start to take that to like restaurants who were forced to shut their doors and started using delivery services that were eventually taking advantage of them and taking all of the profits and leaving them making food for them for free. So all of this gets to be a bigger and bigger problem on the overall economy, just because whenever all of that starts to go away, like when your small mom and pops and your small little coffee shops and stuff can't make it, where do you go when you can meet with people? Like we've pretty much belabored this already. We're going to continue to belabor it because it's what the whole book's about. It's like the connection with other people face to face is a big deal. And if you don't have places to do that, like it gets tough. So this world of commerce, one of the notes I wrote down, I'd never heard of this book. Was it Bookshop? My notes are a little hard to read. I'd not heard of this. I feel like I should have heard of this. But it's essentially a group that helps small book distributors, book publishers. I'm trying to blank.
Local bookstores, basically.
Yeah, basically makes it easy for them to sell books online. Like think of it that way. And I feel like that's something I need to do some looking into. It's like, why have I not heard of this? But it would be a good thing to do. Anyway, there are all these places that are starting to and have been working towards the process of helping you to support small businesses in your local community as opposed to supporting the big mega corporations. And it's those little companies, those little groups that have a much, how do I say that? They have a much better connection to their local community, in that, like the example he gave of surfing in Toronto, which just kind of messed with my head a little bit. It's like surfing in Toronto. People do how do you do that? He explains that later on in a different chapter. It has to do with like high winds on a lake in winter, basically, it seems like. Just did not sound fun at all. But whenever he needed to get a wetsuit, like he did all sorts of research online and just could not figure out what it was he needed to do. He finally called a local surf shop, which that again blew my mind that there's a surf shop in Toronto. And the guy walked him through like, oh, well, if you're doing this and this is what you need. This is your build. Here's what you need. And it's like, absolutely, I'm buying from you. Because that expertise piece is missing when you go online. And you don't get to have that personal connection that helps you work through those details. So I get that in some ways it's better to buy from bigger companies. Like I'm probably not stopping my use of Amazon anytime soon. But I also know that there are a lot of local places that I frequent that have expertise that I need some help with. So trying to support them instead of the megacorps can be a positive thing.
Yeah, I like the idea of being able to shop online and support local businesses. I've got an action item to check out Bookshop, which I've looked at the website, and I don't know, looks interesting. As long as the book isn't twice as expensive,
Right,
I'll probably try to order one of the next ones from this. I looked up my next book on Bookshop, and it's not available there, so that's not an option. But maybe down the road, I'll use this site. I also like to support local businesses whenever I can. I have never thought to myself, well, I'm going to go buy a book at a local bookstore as opposed to ordering it off of Amazon. There are a couple local bookstores near me. And if I am in a place where there is a little bookstore like that has things that I am interested in, and I will tend to buy something there to support it. I'm thinking of Between the Lines, right? That's the name of the one in Woodstock.
That sounds right. I think
I think
so.
so.
Yep.
I'll look it up and I'll put it in the show notes. I like that bookstore. The stuff that they have there I could buy off of Amazon, but when I'm there, I like to support the local bookstore. I've got a little pin on my backpack that says "Fight Evil, Read Books." I bought that at that bookstore. But around me, they're like, I don't even know what they're, because there's typically different genres that are represented by these local bookstores, and none of them are really the ones that I'm interested at are near me. So I tend not to go to those places, but I will buy my pens from Anderson Pens.
Right.
you know, uh, During the pandemic, there were a couple of restaurants that we really liked that we tried to get food from them frequently. Not because we needed to, because we were so busy. We had nothing but time, but we wanted to support them because people weren't eating in there anymore. Whole big section of this chapter is how bad those third-party delivery services
Yeah.
were, which I kind of knew, but like as a reader of that information, what are you going to do with that? Like, you going to go talk to your local company, be like, hey, you shouldn't use this. You should use this other company. They're well aware, believe me.
Yep.
They know what the problems are. And so I don't know, like, what's the tactical takeaway from this? It's probably just support your local business, regardless of who they use for their delivery. Right.
Yep.
So I don't know. This was one I didn't, other than checking out Bookshop, I'm not quite sure what to do with this information.
This one was one that I don't really have takeaways because this is something I've been doing for a long time. By takeaways, I mean action items. Because I know that, like, for example, I tend to do a decent amount of my own mechanic work on our vehicles. Right now, I'm in the middle of a check engine light issue on our truck. And I know what the problem is. I know what part I need because I was able to get the code off of it and all the things. I could order it online and have it at my door the next day. But instead, I know that a local shop has the part because I called them, and I'm going to go pick it up probably tomorrow. But I want to do that because I know that the guys who work there can walk me through the stuff that I need to know and when I'm doing that particular replacement. It's not just a simple unscrew it, screw it back in, and you're done. It's a whole process I've got to go through to fix this. And I'll do that. I just don't want to spend the $700 to have a shop do it when it can cost me $40 in parts. Like, I just don't want to do that. So I know that if I go shop at that place, they can walk me through. Their expertise becomes what I'm paying for. I might pay a few dollars more there than what I could get it for online. It's totally worth it to me. And that's just one instance. Like, I've got a big soundboard project I'm in the middle of. I bought it from our system from a local guy that I've worked with a number of times because he has the expertise. And I could get the same stuff maybe a little bit cheaper if I bought it myself. But again, I'm getting his expertise in the process. So to me, like, that's the piece that sticks out. It's like that whole somebody who knows what they're doing and being able to get access to them and their knowledge. Like, that's a big deal in some arenas. But if it's something like this very specific book I need to get bought, like, whether I buy it at a local place or not, it doesn't really matter. It's just pure price to me at that point.
Isn't it obvious though when you want to go to those places and get the feedback? Because I mean, like, the scenario for that for me would be like musical gear.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The local place that everybody would go to, even though it's not local, is like Guitar Center. I hate going in there. I would rather order something online than go to Guitar Center. But there is a local store that I love because the people there know their stuff. And when I wanted to buy a thin line Telecaster because I wanted, or no, it was a Acoustasonic Telecaster because I wanted the ability to do acoustic and electric. The guy there's like, you really don't want that. That's not a very good guitar. If you want an acoustic, get an acoustic. If you want electric, get an electric. This one's bad at both. It's like, if you really want the Tele, but you want to occasionally play acoustic, this is what you do. You buy the thin line Tele, so you got the acoustic semi-hollow body, right? And then you get a piezo pickup and you plug it directly into an acoustic off-board amp. I was like, oh, that's amazing. That's such a great idea.
Yep.
And that's what you're talking
Yep.
about. But I feel like if that's what you're after, you know that when you see it, and you're kind of attracted to that kind of stuff.
Right.
You don't need a kick in the pants from somebody who wrote a book that you read. Like, hey, you should really start looking for this stuff locally. And maybe that's just our perspective because that's our approach to these books. Maybe that's not how most people would read this book and be looking for that kind of stuff. But yeah, so that's the thing. Like as I read through this, I'm like, well, I'm not gonna change anything because I'm already sort of like doing this where it makes sense. And yeah, online is convenient.
Yep.
A lot of scenarios. I'm going to continue to do that.
It's funny to me that you bring up Guitar Center because I have a few musicians that talk about going there and getting some feedback and picking up gear and stuff. And I'm always like, most of the time when I go in there, which is almost never anymore, they will tell me something and it's like in one particular case, I had somebody recommend a specific, basically it's a ground lift box. All it does is break ground. So sometimes you get like buzzes in the background. A lot of times it's a ground loop. And this basically breaks that for you. And he was pitching this box to me that would solve that problem. It's like, okay, but it takes power. A ground fault issue doesn't need more power introduced to it. It simply needs to take a line in and a line out and then break one of them. Like that's all it needs to do. It doesn't have to have power. So why would I need one with power? And I got to looking, it's like that one was more expensive. So it's like, okay. And then it's like that just didn't make sense to me. So what I've run across is, and I now know that particular box, and I'm not mentioning what it is because you don't ever need it. It just doesn't work for any scenario that it could possibly work for. Like there are many other ways that will do that a lot better. So I basically learned that whenever I go in there, a lot of times I know more than they do, which is an unfortunate situation to be in. So that's why I go to somebody that has toured with A-list singers and knows his stuff very well, way beyond anything I can comprehend. So he's the guy that I go to whenever I need some feedback.
If there's one thing that we've learned the last couple of years, it's the importance of mental health and our overall state of well-being. And you don't need to be going through a pandemic in order to feel stress, anxiety, deal with sleep problems. I talked recently about how I've been dealing with burnout and actually suffered a mild panic attack. Well, that's where things like mindfulness meditation and Headspace in particular can really help, because Headspace helps improve your mental health through their guided meditations, their mindfulness practices, breathing and calming exercises, so much more. These tools help reduce anxiety, boost your mood, help you sleep better. And Headspace has the world's largest library of content with over 1,000 hours of clinically proven mental health exercises. What I really love about Headspace is the guided meditations. They're very soothing, they're very straightforward. And for people who are maybe a little bit nervous about mindfulness meditation because they don't want to lean into the spiritual aspect of it, they focus solely on the practice. Just training your brain to focus on your breath. And that is the thing that really unlocks a lot of the health and mental benefits. I've noticed a big boost since I've started using Headspace consistently. And it's helped more than 100 million people like me worldwide. They can help you too. You don't want to miss this special offer that they've created just for Bookworm listeners. So for a limited time, you can all try Headspace free for 30 days by going to headspace.com/bookworm. Now, you won't find this offer anywhere else. You have to use this link, headspace.com/bookworm, to unlock all of Headspace free for 30 days. This is not something that they normally do. Headspace.com/bookworm. Our thanks to Headspace for sponsoring this episode of the Bookworm Podcast.
One of the places that I tend to avoid, though, whenever I'm doing all of this is actually the city. Which is where we're going next, which is on Thursday is when we go to the city. And I had all sorts of qualms with this particular chapter. Did not like this one at all. And some of that might be because of the way he started this particular one, but he ends up talking about like smart cities and like this digital promise of everything fully connected, electric cars that are autonomous and stuff. And although we think that's a cool thing, we've learned that, the more that type of thing happens, it doesn't actually decrease traffic it actually increases traffic just because of, it makes it easy. Like take Uber, for example. Like in theory, it would mean fewer people have vehicles on the road because they're leaving their cars at home. But what actually happens is the Uber drivers they're not going to park somewhere and pay for parking. So they just keep driving until somebody pings them for another ride. So there's actually more cars on the road because of that. But he starts this particular chapter, and I wrote this quote down because it just bugged me, and I'll explain why after I read this. But anyway, he says that cities at their core are a critical mass of brain power that naturally generates ideas, innovation, and energy by sheer physical proximity. And I don't think I would argue with him on that. I would simply argue with the quality of all of those things. Like, what quality of ideas, what quality of innovation, what quality of energy are you talking about when you're talking about people to people? Because yes, there is a lot of physical proximity, but I'm saying this as a farm kid who grew up on many thousands of acres at my disposal and not only seeing one house in like a mile radius, like that was it. And just having access to tons and tons of open space where if you went outside, you didn't hear an airplane. You didn't hear cars unless there was one that happened to be going by on the highway that was a half a mile away. Like, you just didn't hear that stuff. And then whenever we moved to Minnesota, we bought a house in a little suburb, in a little subdivision, right? Like you do, on a third of an acre. And over the span of like 8 years, like my stress levels just constantly went up and up and up. And I only know this because we eventually bought 5 acres and moved away from it. And I know that having moved, like, there's way more peace in my brain just because I'm not in all of that all the time. And there's not so much stuff in the background constantly. Now, either that's the problem that cities create, or that's a disconnect between cities and Joe's personality. Like, it's going to be one of those two things. I like to think it's the former. A lot of people would tell me it's the latter. But regardless, his whole section is talking about like what cities have to offer and how good that is. And every time he brought that up, it just made me cringe. It's like, no, that's not good. maybe I'm just being an introvert. Who knows?
I don't know. I feel like I see both sides of this. For a long time in college specifically, I was pretty adamant that I wanted to live in a city, just because there is a different energy there. There are different groups of people that assemble in cities that you won't find other places. But there's a lot of benefit from the large open spaces as well. Kind of where I live now is neither of those things. I've got the suburbs with the people around here who typically don't care about Apple tech or productivity and like think I'm weird because I make podcasts, and when I worked online, they didn't think I really had a job.
Yep.
So I'm kind of in like the worst sweet spot of those overlapping circles, I guess. But I don't know. I think you're right that there's a tone that comes across here that cities are great and they are the genesis of every good thing that has ever happened in human civilization. That's not what he's saying, but that's kind of how it comes across. And a large part of this chapter is really talking about urban planning.
Yes.
Which is kind of weird.
Yep.
Because unless you are in the city, you really don't have a whole lot of context for this. Now, I've been to enough big cities. I had to go to Austin frequently. I had to go to Kansas City. You're close to Minneapolis. Like, we have experience, right, in those environments. But I think there's a large portions of the population where like they've gone there a couple of times and they just have no desire to go back. And I think that's completely fine. So I guess if I'm going to put on the perspective of the wannabe city dweller from many years ago, the urban planning stuff is kind of interesting, but even then, like, doesn't really do it for me. uh, I do think it's interesting, the whole concept of the traffic that you were talking about, like the Uber drivers. Like that's not an issue where I live. Yeah,
Right.
Uber is around here, but I remember several years ago coming back from the airport, and I'll just get an Uber, and there's no cars. There's service in my area, but there are no cars available. It's not something you can rely on. And even like Appleton, the town that I'm in, it's maybe 100,000 people. They just got those scooters, the Bird scooters, because the guy who invented that company, Bird, he's actually from Appleton. So
Okay, yeah.
it's like a pet project,
Yep.
right? And I see this battle being played out locally, because there's a whole bunch of people who like they don't want to live in the city. They drive their cars everywhere, like you were talking about. They're like, these scooters are a nuisance, and they're right. People take them and they just leave them all over the place, and people are zipping up and down the sidewalks with them. Like I know somebody who got hit by one of those. Like people are stupid. So yeah, we don't want these. But then there are like the perspective he's taking with this is, well, these cities are built for these cars, but it'd be way better if everybody just lived in this area. We didn't have all the traffic, and you could just use the scooters and get around to the different places. And wouldn't that be awesome? Like, yeah, I could kind of see that too. But it's not as simple, I feel like, as he makes it out to be in this chapter.
Yep. I think there's just a lot more to it. I mean, I get how people want to have a lot of tech in the cities, but it seems like the more that you put into these digital things, the more that like the companies tend to collect on you, and then they that power ends up somehow making its way back to the government somehow. Not super thrilled with that particular component of it, but
I feel like this one's just kind of weird.
it is.
Like, did he pick this one because there was another day he needed to fill? Like,
Or I think it's just important to him.
sure, that's
like,
fair.
It seems to be a thing that's a big deal to him, because he talks about all the big cities that he has lived in and around, and it's always been an important component to him. So I get why I get why he chose that, because like that's something that's super important to him. And like to me, I'm just reading that like I want nothing to do with this at all. Like I'm actually the opposite. I want to avoid this. So I am not the person for that particular chapter.
I think I tend to skew that way as well.
Yep. All right, let's keep going. It's now Friday, and let's talk about the culture. And by culture, basically, I think he just means live performances of any kind. That's kind of the main talking point through this
That's fair.
chapter. And maybe I gravitated and summarized it that way just because like that's an area that I tend to do a lot of work in. But he does talk about how things like comedians or going to a live concert, like these things are all very, very different. Like he uses the example of Hamilton. Like he got to see Hamilton right before lockdown, and then attempted to watch it on Disney Plus. Have you watched this? I watched it on Disney Plus.
Yeah. So this was interesting because I remember Hamilton being all the rage, and it wasn't coming anywhere near me. I couldn't get tickets. It wasn't even an option. So when everything got shut down and it went online, I'm like, oh, hey, cool. We can watch it now.
Yep. My experience was that I had heard about it and that people were absolutely loving it. I looked up, because like we're close to the Twin Cities. Surely it's going to come to Minneapolis, St. Paul, somewhere. And it was coming, but it was going to come twice, I think, whenever I looked it up. And you couldn't get tickets to the first one, and the second one was like 18 months out, and they were going to be like close to $100 a ticket. I was like, that's not my style. Like, it's way too steep for me. But a free trial on Disney Plus, I will do.
For context here, he was at Hamilton.
Yes.
It was during the intermission when the NBA season got canceled. And I remember that event specifically. Yep. Like the teams came out, they warmed up, and then they just left.
Yep.
And everyone was like, whoa, what the heck is this? So he's talking about how they're at this show. It's during intermission. Everybody gets the message that the NBA season has been canceled. And now they're going back in to finish watching the show. And that is the entry point into now everything is online.
Correct.
So I feel like he feels it more than we
Correct.
did.
Yeah. I know that, first off, Hamilton's a great show. If you haven't seen it, I feel like you should go watch it on Disney Plus. And the thing that he gets into is how like these live performances that went online, like people that went to Twitch or they went to like live streaming and like all of these things, comedians, it wasn't the same because like they're performing in front of a camera and like I can tell you all sorts of things that are wrong. Like you're in front of the camera, you don't have the audience in front of you. You're feeding off of the audience. There's also like take the Hamilton performance. Like I know that whenever you're in a room like that, it feels different, not necessarily because the cameras and the sound system and stuff are different, but just literally because the volume that they're able to crank those speakers is much higher than what you're going to be able to do at home in 99% of cases. Like most people do not have a sound system that's going to be able to rival that. Like we just had a comedy night at our church, and watching a comedian live in the room with him is very different than me watching it on YouTube. Like I could watch the exact same person. I could watch somebody funnier than him and laugh more with him in the room than I would with somebody else online. We had a band that performed beforehand and it was full concert level, which is super fun for me, but it's cranked up louder than normal. Whenever it's cranked up that loud and he hits the kick drum, it actually, like you feel it. You don't just hear it, you feel it. You don't do that at home. Like I can crank things up at home, but you're not going to generally do that unless you have a crazy sound system at home. I know you people are out there. So like it's just different, and you also have like the shared experience. If you're at a live concert, people start singing along with the music, like you have this huge group of people around you singing and you tend to join in. Well, you can join in and sing when you're at home, but you just hear your own voice, and for some people, that's okay. For a lot of people, they don't like hearing themselves sing. So that's a bad experience. So anyway, I can go on and on about this one. This one kind of got me triggered a little bit, but it's one that like, yes, it's very different live than watching it online or watching a recording of something. So I totally get how this could be a bad experience trying to watch everything on a screen.
I understand that part of it, and I agree with it completely. I mean, I grew up playing violin. I've played with different symphonies and orchestras, and there's just something about being in that place together, doing the thing that, you get to a whole nother heightened level of experience. I agree. So I agree with a lot of like the performance aspects of everything that he's talking about here, and how like when you're watching something online, the second you close the screen, you're alone. I know somebody who is in the New Orleans area, and during the pandemic, they started just like doing this on a smaller scale outside their house.
Oh, yeah, I heard about these things. Yeah.
Rooftop jazz concerts.
Yep.
And he was doing them for a couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden the cops showed up, and he thought they were going to get shut down, and the cops were like, this is really cool. So they did it for like a year and a half. So that's cool. Like those are the kind of things that people need to bring stuff together. However, that's like one avenue of this. And like the fact that these Grammy winning like musicians, like it feels different online and it's not the same to them and they miss the old thing. That's not necessarily, I shouldn't say it's not all bad. Right. The fact that you don't need to have an amazing band and have a contract with a producer in order to make music and share it online is not a bad thing. And like Twitch streaming, the stuff that we're doing right now, like there are hurdles that if we were doing this the old way and the people in the big halls and things like that, there are like hurdles that obstacles we'll never be able to overcome in order to perform in those arenas. So the fact that we can do it digitally, I think that's awesome. And I think it makes it a lot more accessible for a lot of people who don't have access to the resources that they need, don't have the right people to open the doors for them in those other types of scenarios. So I don't think this is all bad. I think you got to see both sides of this. However, yes, you should meet in person whenever you can. And one other thing with this, which I was really disappointed, because this whole thing about like it's different when you're there together, that applies to church. Now, there's a whole separate section, chapter 7, Sunday, Soul, where I thought he was going to talk about this, but that's really just get outside.
Correct. Yes.
So there's like a whole chapter that should be written on that specific piece of it, I feel, because I mean, you work at a church, you ran the live stream. You would probably agree, like it's different. The religious experience is different when you meet together as opposed to when you have to tune in because you're not feeling well and you don't want to bring stuff to the building, right? But bringing yourself to the building should be the default whenever possible.
Yeah, that's actually why, like, I think I've got everybody on board with this. We actually treat our live stream as if it doesn't exist. Like, a lot of churches will acknowledge, like, and thanks for those of you who are online joining us today. It's like, we don't do that because I don't want you to be a first-class citizen if you're just on the live stream, because that doesn't count. So you might be upset with me if you disagree with me on that, but frankly, like, that's not, like, you're missing so much of the actual point that I don't even want to acknowledge
relationship
it.
There.
Like, it's there.
Yeah, exactly.
We still do it every week. I have a lot of people that say that they start coming to the church just because they were able to watch the live stream. It's actually an anxiety thing I've found for a lot of people. Like, we have a lot of people who are brand new to the faith, brand new to the church, who can, quote unquote, try church, if you will, to figure out what is that service like and what do people wear? Because you can see a few people, and what is the pastor going to do? When is the service over? Like, how do I know when to do what? And people have a lot of anxiety over that type of thing. And being able to watch a service or two online before you come to the building for the first time seems to help people with that. I don't want to discount that. I've got people who are shut-ins who can't get out. Like, I get that. But when I have people that say that, well, I was tired when I got up, so I just made some bacon and eggs and, turned on the live stream and watched it at home. It's like, shame on you. Like, that's my viewpoint. Anyway, I can get heated over that one. Let's go to Saturday because it's way more fun to talk about.
Well, real quick, the one last thing with this, because I think this leads into Saturday.
Okay.
But like my pastors have shared, like, because our church has had services on the local television station for like 20 years, right? So occasionally they'll get people who pass away, and it's like, who do you want to facilitate your service? And they're like, oh, my pastor is. And my pastors are like, I have no idea who this person is.
Right.
It's the most awkward thing. It's like, I'm supposed to do a eulogy for somebody that I've never actually met.
Yep.
Right. That relationship component, that is the height of the religious experience. It's the community. Right. So, and that's kind of what he's talking about chapter 5, not at all what he's talking about chapter 7. So now let's go to chapter 6.
Okay. So chapter 6 is conversation, and he starts this off, and there's a little bit of a section here where it talks about, like, what is conversation. It's a very brief part, but there's 3 components that he identifies, and I've heard this in a bunch of different ways. Sometimes it's 3 pieces, sometimes it's 5. But in this particular case, he's referring to when you're having a conversation, there are 3 components that lead to that conversation being like 3 different levels of that. One is the language you're using. So, like, right now you can hear my voice. You can catch the tone of my voice. That's the second one. So you can hear the words. You can hear the tone with which I'm sharing these words. But then the third one is body language. Now, if you are watching the live stream, you can see kind of some of my body language as I'm saying this, but you can't see all of it. So, like, I'm chest high on this, right? So it's a headshot. So you're not going to see, what am I doing with my feet right now? You have no idea. So you're not getting all
You
of
don't
that.
know if Joe's wearing pants.
You don't know if I have pants on. Like, I just want to point that out. Maybe I don't. I came to church in my underwear. That's a little
that
weird.
Changes the conversation if you're not wearing pants.
It's very true. It's very true. But I am at work, and I work at a church. Just, you draw your own conclusions. So body language is a big deal. What somebody's wearing, how long is somebody's beard? Are they wearing glasses? Like, these things all inform our conversation and how we have that conversation with each other. And being in the same physical room, in the same space, does change things. Like, maybe you both smell something. Maybe you both, like, there's a sound that's in the background. Mike's got his fancy microphone, so if something hits the room door, he hears it, but we don't. If that happens here, you would hear it through my mic, because this place is noisy. So anyway, like, conversation is difficult to have even in a video sense, so much so that he even points out that he's not sure he would actually call it a conversation. He would just call it communication. It's like you're not actually engaging in developing empathy and relationship with each other. It's purely sharing of facts back and forth. And I don't know that I would say he's completely wrong. I don't think he's necessarily happy about all of this. I think he's just jaded when he's writing this and maybe just taking it a little bit too far. But it's interesting to me that whenever you think about conversations and the good conversations that you've had in the past, like it's rare that I talk about like a most meaningful conversation is one I had on the phone. Like that doesn't seem to be the case in most scenarios. It's usually I had lunch with this person and that was one of the best conversations I've had in my life. Like that's typically what you would hear about. So he does break it down a little bit in just saying, this doesn't necessarily always happen in a productive way when it's through a screen.
Which is fair. I like the distinction. I actually think it's pretty brilliant of the communication virtually as opposed to conversation. I think in most scenarios that is accurate. However, it's not all bad. I remember during the pandemic when people were really wanting this sort of thing. We connected with JF and we played virtual Yahtzee. JF is nowhere near me. We were never going to do that, personally, but
Right.
we were both craving it, so we made it happen during the pandemic, where did FaceTime and opened up the board game table and, okay, JF, it's your turn. I'll roll the dice for you. Which ones do you want to keep? Not the ideal version of Yahtzee, but it's definitely better than not playing Yahtzee together.
Right.
So I think it's just finding the right situation, tactically deploying these tools. Again, maybe if you're in a city and everyone that you care about is within walking distance, like this is a scenario that you could create. I don't know, that it's not possible for me. My parents are currently in Florida. We were there last week visiting them and it was great being able to be together, but I'm not going to just like not talk to them until they're back home. Right. We're going to connect virtually
Right.
because I care about them. So this chapter is where he brings up the Sherry Turkle stuff. And that was a great book. I feel like you should go back and listen to that conversation rather than try to like rehab it here.
Yes.
The other thing I got out of this one, like he talked about the negative aspects of social media. He talks about how clicks equal power. And I don't know, that's at this point something we've talked about a lot. So it's kind of like, well, do we really have to have this conversation again? I'm willing to have that conversation again if there's going to be something new here, but there is nothing new
Right.
here.
Yeah.
Maybe at some point we just, dissect the social dilemma, because I feel like that's the best resource for this kind of thing. But I don't know. I guess it's valuable to realize that online you hear about people, but rarely from them, and you should look to connect with people with different viewpoints. But I feel like we're already like trying to do that. That's been one of the takeaways for me from Bookworm, honestly, is like we read these books and they expose me to different ideas, not things that I would have naturally encountered in my day-to-day life otherwise. And I'm like, oh, you know what? I should really consider that. It feels weird. It's awkward. I don't agree with it. I should lean into it, right? Even though it makes me a little bit uncomfortable. And if you do that, I feel like your online experience ends up being a lot better.
I just want to point out that like the point you made about, when family is away, because I have family that's a long ways away, and phone calls and video calls, like they're great at filling gaps, I think. But we always know that that's what it's doing. It's filling a gap until we see each other face to face. Like that's the point.
Good point.
And that relationship is much deeper and extensive whenever we do meet in person. And it can be extended and have a little bit of an effect whenever you're doing all the video stuff. Like, again, that's definitely something that can fill that gap. But again, it's not like if that's all you're given, like, and you have none of the actual in-person at all, ever, like it gets tough. So it's tough when it's not just a gap filler. It is the end in itself.
But that's the thing is like, I don't know that anybody after the pandemic is going to argue that every interaction should be virtual.
Correct.
So this is a weird time to be making this argument.
Yep.
It feels like it made a lot more sense coming from Sherry Turkle when we read Reclaiming Conversation before all of this. Right?
Yep. Well, let's go to Sunday, where we don't talk about church, at least not really. And he talks about soul. And honestly, I had a hard time nailing down what he was getting at here, because in my head, like, this is a layup, like this is an easy one. I say that knowing that I'm a church person, so it's like, okay, well, this is an easy thing, and then he doesn't go there.
Well, he's Jewish, so
Correct. Yeah, so he talks about Sunday being the day when people, put on their exercise clothes and do a good workout or go on hikes, get outside. This was an area that he seems to have not really struggled with a whole lot, because he did he would disconnect. So again, you mentioned he is Jewish and has had this habit of disconnecting on Sunday for a long time. I guess for him it was Shabbat, so it would have been Saturday. I don't remember what he said. Is it Sunday that he does that, or is it Saturday?
Good question. I caught the Shabbat, but I didn't catch the specifics of when exactly it happened.
He said something about making his challah bread on Friday going into Saturday, but then he was on Sunday. Maybe he's just making a cultural change for us. Anyway, regardless, he has a day when he disconnects and he turns off his phones, his computers, all the things, and they don't do tech. And that is something that I know I've done in the past. It's actually kind of tricky for me working at a church, because so many people will text or call me on Sunday morning when I'm there at work, like running sound or something. So like I'm between services and they need to get a hold of me because the printer's busted. So like stuff like that does happen. So I can't really do that on a Sunday morning, but I definitely could do that whenever I get home from church and shut things off and just be done then. So like that's something that I've got as an action item for the book, is to do a tech shutdown on Sunday afternoon. And that's something that I know a lot of people do and have a lot of success with, and it can be super helpful. So just kind of getting that break. But again, if we come back to the book, he does talk about how like nature being the true healer, and going for walks, going for hikes, getting outside, no matter how cold it is, I don't know how much snow's on the ground, like go outside, it's okay. And it can be a bit of a healing process. So again, not really a religious chapter like I was expecting.
Yep, agreed. I agree with all of the stuff about getting outside. That was something that I determined to do very early on in 2020. I think it was late March when I decided I was going to get outside for either a run or a bike ride every single day. And I did that from the end of March until the end of October. So rain or shine, I either biked. My bike route is 8.5 miles, or I went for at least a couple mile run. I logged hundreds and hundreds of miles that year. And it did definitely have a big impact on my mental state. So I think that is definitely a good aim. However, I don't know. Yeah, not what I was expecting with this chapter.
Kind of threw me off, yeah.
I did also have an action item, though, to unplug on the Sabbath, is how I put it. I don't think I'm going to just completely turn stuff off. We got multiple services on Sunday that I am there for in the morning and in the evening. So it doesn't work for me to just turn stuff off after I get home from the morning service, because occasionally it's, hey, I need you to preach for the evening service, right, or something like that. However, there are focus modes. And so I am going to set up a Sabbath focus mode and only allow a few things through. And I'm pretty confident that will help a lot. I don't get a ton of notifications already, but just whatever I can do to limit the noise here and just have that day where you're not connected to your devices. People can get a hold of you if they absolutely need to, but setting up the boundaries there where only certain people can get through, I feel like that's going to be really healthy, even if it doesn't result in a huge decrease in the number of notifications that I'm receiving or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to the conclusion of the book. And the end of this, I mean, it's just that he's rewrapping up things, and he kind of basically pitches it as we had this digital future that was pitched to us that had all these answers, and it failed us. And just because something can be done, this is actually a thing that I've talked about in tech at church quite a bit. It's like, just because something can be done doesn't mean it should be done. And
Right.
I regularly get into that conversation of, can I, just because I can turn down the house lights on the congregation on a Sunday morning, I'm not going to, because it's not something we should do. Like and I have all sorts of rationale and reasons for that. So we don't do that. And just because I can do something doesn't mean we're going to. We could run with click tracks. I know some churches do that for their band so that everything can be perfectly in sync. We don't, and have no interest in that. And there's a whole bunch of these things, like specifically with church and production and stuff, that I will not do, because I think it takes away from the shared experience on a Sunday morning. So anyway, that's a whole different thing altogether. But I did like that phrase, like, just because something can be done, just because you can put sensors underneath the sidewalk to see how many people are walking on it, doesn't mean it's something you should do. It's kind of weird to do that, but people do it. So anyway, he's just wrapping up, basically saying this digital future that was so great and so grand, it's not so great and so grand, and because we tried it out, we kicked the tires in the car and took it for a test drive, and I don't like it. Take it back. So that's kind of what he's saying.
Yeah, to which I would reply, you're holding it wrong. I think there are ways to implement aspects of the digital future, but it all comes down to intention, and it shouldn't be the default. I agree with that. There's a couple things he says specifically in this last chapter, which I think are good. Now, recognizing what we missed made us appreciate what we had more. Agree with that. Don't accept digital as the default setting. Agree with that. And the future is analog because we are analog. I agree with that. We're not going to ever get rid of that. That doesn't mean that there's no good that can come from it either, though. And it's all packaged in this. Remember COVID. So you get this immediate visceral reaction like, oh, yeah, that was awful, right? We all understand that was awful. And that's the perspective he takes every chapter. Oh, yeah, that was awful. I don't think it was all awful. I think you got to recognize the context, and used sparingly, intentionally in some other ways, some other scenarios could be a good thing. Doesn't mean that we should just automatically do that, though. Agree with that.
Yep, I'm with you. All right, you ready for action items?
Let's do it.
I have one, and that is to do this tech shutdown, like shutting off things, or at least restricting them, I guess. I kind of like your idea of setting up like the focus modes things. I kind of already have that for a Sunday morning, because like it restricts them. And I have a bunch of that type of thing for when I'm off work as well, to kind of like, so my boss isn't texting me and it's an issue. He knows that, by the way. Like, don't just do that blindly. But anyway, like the concept of shutting down some things but not other things. Like, we listen to music on Sunday afternoons. Like, well, I'm streaming that through Apple Music, so I can't completely shut it all down, because that's a very fun thing for us as a family. So trying to figure out what that means, but I think you get the gist. Like, I don't want to be sitting there looking at my screen the whole time. Like that's the part that I want to eliminate.
Right.
How about you?
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's one of my action items as well, is to unplug on the Sabbath, as you kind of just talked about. I do have that other one, though, to check out Bookshop. I'm not committing to buying something off of there necessarily, but I'm gonna take a look at the site and the service and which bookstores they support. If I can find a local one that I can buy from, then that's cool. And I think there's something to be said about just buying from a local shop, even if it's not the one where you happen to be. I know Austin Kleon is really involved with, is it Book People? I think that's the one.
Sounds
in Austin.
right, yeah.
I know, like, when he came out with his latest, actually it's not the latest one anymore. I forget which one it was, but there was a thing that he did like through Book People. If you bought it through them, you got an autographed copy, as opposed to just buying it off of Amazon.
Sure.
It's still available via Amazon and other places, but because he had a relationship with that local bookstore, he was able to sign a bunch of copies and then say, hey, you should really buy it from this place. Like, that's cool. I like that. But if it's more of a pain to get the books that I want to read, I do that frequently enough. I'm not going to go out of my way to say that I did this.
Well, style and rating. For style, I will say he has an interesting style, actually. I think it's changed quite a bit since the last book I read by him, because I went back and looked at it a little bit just as like, did he used to do this? But he didn't. He's changed his style quite a bit, but he has a lot of scenarios where he's saying that, and this was something that went wrong. And then he has this long list of things that are examples of that. And it's not like 4 or 5. It's like 15 to 20 things that he lists, and it's like an entire page worth of examples. It's not necessarily bad. It just got to be like, this is a lot. Like, you're kind of upset right now. I kind of wondered if he was doing some angry writing when he wrote this, because he's definitely like old man complaining at times. Like, it's definitely what's going on. So it's an interesting style. Again, it's very story based, so it's, I think, an easy read. As far as like, is he all 100% right? I think he's just upset that things had to be done completely and 100%. Like, working from home and being on Zoom all day long. Yeah, that's terrible. But doing a Zoom call a day or every other day, and then working from home and being able to work on your craft, that's not necessarily the same. Like, that's not necessarily bad. But he kind of pitches it like all working from home is bad. And then when you get to school, like all virtual school is bad. Well, that's not necessarily true. What if somebody's working full time and they're taking a couple classes at night, but it's, on demand sort of thing, so they can do it when they have time? Like, that's a different scenario.
Yep.
The commerce piece, the culture pieces, like conversation, all of this stuff, like you can do all of these things in moderation digitally, and it's okay. And again, it can fill a gap. And I think you've brought that up on almost every one of these, Mike, and rightly so, that there is a place for this digitally. And when it's taken in totality and it encompasses every component of it, that's when it gets to be a bit of an issue. So I think he's kind of overreached in that, just because the timing of when this came out was very much pandemic on the heels of. So it's not something that he's far removed from and was writing in the middle of. So I think it's kind of a reaction book. I don't think this is going to age well. Some of these books that we read, like these are perennial books. They're going to last a long time. If you're going to read this one, you're going to have to do it soon so that you don't forget some things. If you wait a couple years, it might get to be where it's a bit too far removed. Maybe a couple years is too soon, but you get my point. As far as how to rate this, there's a lot of stuff in here that's like, yeah, I could see how I want that to be analog. And there's a lot of stuff like, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm still going to buy from Amazon. Like, I'm not going to abandon that. So I think at this particular point, you're wrong, Mike. I'm going to say,
I guessed.
Mike's typing what he thinks I'm going to rate it as in the notes. I'm going to put it at 3.5. You're close. He thought I was going to put it at 3.0, but
that's what I had it originally. I got rid of it, put 0.0 as you started to get more negative in your review.
So no, I'm going to put it at 3.5. I just think that, it's overreaching in a lot of ways. It's an interesting read. And again, if you are into reading debriefs of worldwide pandemics, this is a good book to pick up. But at the end of the day, you probably just need to listen to this episode and not worry about the book. What are your thoughts?
Well, I originally wanted to rate it at 3.5 as well, because even though I have disagreements and issues with the perspective taken in a lot of the different chapters, he is a pretty good writer, and it is an entertaining read. It's very one-sided, his experience during the pandemic. Yeah, he's talked to a lot of other people and he brings in those little anecdotes, but it's so story-driven from his personal experience. And you can tell that just by like the way that the chapters are set up and things like that. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not for me though. And as I was reflecting on this, Like, what else would I recommend over this? Bowling Alone. I feel like that speaks to a
Sure.
lot of these issues a lot better and has a lot more research basis behind it. And I can't remember exactly what I rated that book. I don't think I rated it super high, but as I was reading this one, I was like, Bowling Alone is better. So I'm going to rate this 3.0. I don't know. It's a fine read. I don't think I'm going to recommend it necessarily to anybody. I wish I had read the Revenge of Analog, not just for this episode, but I wish I had that as context. I wish I could line this one up alongside that one. But in terms of when should you do analog things, when should you do digital things, Chris Bailey talks about that better in How to Calm Your Mind. In terms of the sociological, what is this doing to us as a society? Again, Bowling Alone is better. Like, I don't know where this one fits. It just seems kind of weird. And I don't appreciate wrapping it all in the COVID narrative, honestly. I mean, as he's writing it, that's fine. If I had read this 6 months ago, a year ago, does that change I've been asking myself, does that change my interaction with this book? I don't know that it does, but maybe. So maybe some of this is just timing. But yeah, it's okay.
You ranked Bowling Alone at a 3.5.
That's what I thought.
I rated it at a 2.5.
So, okay. And it's long. It's not an entertaining read, but I think we read that one before COVID. And I feel like at this point, probably we go back and look at that, kind of like How to Read a Book. And we're like, man, there was a lot of profound stuff in here. He was right.
December 2020.
Okay. So it was in the middle of it all. That's right. There was like an addendum sort of thing at the end. This is how this applies to COVID. But I feel like that type of stuff about this is how this is changing communities. That whole perspective is more interesting to me than urban planning.
Okay, let's put it on the shelf. What's next, Mike?
Next is Master Your Motivation by Susan Fowler. Recommendation by Martin. So hopefully this one is good. No, I think it will be. I've gotten a whole bunch of recommendations from people, by the way, since I've mentioned that I wanted to read a book on motivation. Thank you for those. I've bought several books on this topic. But yeah, if you give me a good book recommendation, I will buy it.
All right. And then after that, I've selected the book 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. This is by Jordan B. Peterson. Have you ever heard of this book?
I have.
Okay.
This is a lightning rod for controversy.
It is.
Very bookwormish.
Yep. So this is one that, Jordan Peterson is one of those people that people generally either love or hate. Very few people tend to be in that middle ground. And this book's been out for a little while. And I think it was, 2018 is when it came out. So anyway, I'm kind of curious. It's kind of a philosophy take on a handful of things. So it should be interesting. It'll be a fun conversation.
I have been kind of avoiding this one intentionally. However, now that you've picked it, I'm excited. We're going to get to talk about it.
I'm not going to lie. This has been on my to-read list for a very long time, and I've had it show up many, many, many times from recommendations from other people in the last probably 4 months. It's like, I feel like maybe I should do this one now. So some people may hate that we are doing this book, but I think it'll be an entertaining conversation regardless. It's a long one, though. Was it 400 pages?
Yep. So get cracking.
Yep. Gap books?
I read 3 books last week.
Whoa.
Yeah. Most of them are pretty boring. The most interesting one, which is still going to be pretty boring for a lot of people, is this book called Top Grading by Bradford Smart. It's essentially a hiring process. We just went through the hiring process at the day job.
All right.
So relevant to me, but I don't know. It's kind of interesting. It's a very different take on the hiring process. I'll summarize it for you so you don't have to buy the book, but in case you do want it, buy it. The link will be in the show notes. Essentially what you do when you interview people is you open it up with a threat of a reference check by saying, as part of our process, we require that you set up a conversation with one of your former managers or bosses to verify that they will say the same thing about your work as you say.
Whoa.
You don't actually have to talk to them. You just have to threaten that. And you do it in a way that it's completely legal and stuff like that. But that immediately eliminates all the people, obviously, who are lying on their resumes.
That might be just a brilliant thing right there. Interesting.
Yep, exactly.
Huh.
So it's a standard business book. It's like 300 some pages, and that's really all you need out of it. But
Interesting. Cool. Well, I have one Gap book I'm in the middle of right now, which is The Cost of Discipleship, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but I've got a friend of mine that wanted to read it together. So kind of have a quasi book club in-person sort of thing going. His initiation, not mine. So anyway, that's kind of what I'm in the middle of right now.
nice.
All right, so that brings us to the end of the show. But I have a quick announcement before I get too far into this, and that's just that because we're in the middle of this migration of the Bookworm community from, to Circle, there's going to be a post on the existing community probably in the next couple days explaining the process. But basically, if you're a subscribing member, which we're very grateful to you for doing, you're going to get an invite to the new community, which will have basically a free trial for whatever time frame you have left on your existing subscription. And you just need to add a payment method to it in order for that membership to continue. So you'll get an email with all the stuff on that from us, an invite with all the details. Just got to accept it and do the stuff. It's pretty simple. So there'll be a post on the existing community about how all that works and one on the new whenever you get there, and then we'll do that migration. So it should be a pretty simple process. If you have issues, let us know. I'm sure you will. It'd be great. So again, thanks to all of you who do that, and I hope that's a simple process. We'll be in a much better spot once we get that all moved over. So excited to have that underway. So again, thanks to all of you who are paying members. That link will stay the same for how to get there, bookworm.fm/membership. I know that that's going to remain the same link, so you can continue to go there to become a subscriber and get all of Mike's book notes. We're migrating all of that stuff over. All of it comes along for the ride. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
The ad-free version, maybe a bootleg version.
Oh yeah, the bootleg. That'll be entertaining.
All right. So thanks everyone for hanging out today. If you're reading along with us, pick up Master Your Motivation by Susan Fowler, and we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.